This is Ron Friends, comics illustrator, and this is a bumper for the Amazing Spider Talk.
Too many who know the angles, uncover and untangle all the questions and the webs left out to tangle. Be in 1962, last Wednesday's afternoon, they'll bend your ears with reckless self-abandon. The Amazing Spider Talk. The Amazing Spider Talk. Come swing through the air, sit back and prepare for the Amazing Spider
Hello and welcome to the Amazing Spider Talk. My name is Dan Gvozden, and I'm the founder and editor of SuperiorSpiderTalk.com.
And I'm Mark Ginocchio, founder of the Chasing Amazing blog and an editor at Superior Spider Talk.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us for this special episode of Amazing Spider Talk. We hope you enjoy this podcast and that it provides an intelligent conversation between two fans and collectors as we look at the Spider-Man comic universe in a bit of a bigger picture.
Yeah, Dan, and we kind of had to call an audible for this episode. We were originally going to talk about the newest issue of Amazing Spider-Man, but it was delayed or who knows what, or solicitations were wrong, whatever. It's going to come out, I think, this week. So instead, we're going to be talking about the big news that came out of that recent Marvel Retailer Summit that spawned a bunch of controversy. I mean, there were articles all over the place. There was even something in the New York Times. The Gray Lady, fake news, right, Dan? I mean, what's that about?
The New York Times is covering the Marvel Retailer Summit. That's something I never thought would ever happen.
Yeah, and just to show like what a huge bit of news this is. I don't know if it's that huge. It's cool. It's interesting. It's very interesting. But we're bringing in a special guest all the way from our brother podcast. It's a Scoopy Scoop with the ultimate spin, Brian Jacob. Thanks for joining us, Brian.
Hey now, it's great to be back, guys.
And Brian, you just came out. You're coming like fresh off of an interview with Brian Michael Bendis. Congratulations on that awesome interview.
Thank you. It's a really surreal thing, but yeah.
It's good that you did it, Brian, because if Dan ever got to interview Bendis, he might just cry the whole time.
It will be literally just me asking questions about the most niche things that happen in his books.
No, you would totally be like Chris Farley with Paul McCartney. Like, remember that time?
Oh,
did Ultimate Spider-Man? That was great.
That was awesome.
That was awesome.
I would turn into that guy that like stands up at like, you know, at con Q&As that asks questions like on page 14, panel 5, what were you intending with Speedball looking at the mirror?
There you go. Well, Dan, last time we had Brian on, we went all the way to Funky Place. So why don't we go to Funky Town and talk about some retailer summit stuff? All right, Dan. So, and Brian, I forgot you were there, Brian. I'm sorry. But I'm just so used to always talking to Dan. So we've been talking about in the intro here this Marvel Retailer Summit, and you know, for some of you who don't stay fixated to comic book industry news, you might be saying, what are you guys talking about? So what's basically happened is, over the last several months, Marvel has been losing a good chunk of its market share in terms of sales, mostly to DC, the distinguished competition. So a bunch of Marvel executives had this kind of sit-down summit with some of their like major retailer representatives to kind of hash out what's wrong, what could we be doing better, what do you see are the problems in terms of how we sell, how our product is selling in your stores, or what have you. And there was a lot of viewpoints being discussed, but like some of the major points that kind of got brought up from both sides was, this idea of the event fatigue, which we've talked about at length, Dan, you and I on this show, and also the timing of events, the fact that one event ends and then you're already 3 months into another one. There was talk about kind of just the length of all the different characters. There's new characters versus the core characters, Iron Man versus new Iron Man and whatever that we've been seeing, and kind of how that's been affecting sales of those books. All of the reboots and restarts and the new number ones, or in some cases it's not even a new number one issue, but they kind of didn't we see that with Spider-Man and Spider-Gwen recently, Dan and Brian, with the kissing in a tree arc or whatever the heck we called it.
Right, like all new arc starts here. They'll slap a big one in the corner.
Yeah. I mean, it's confusing. I guess kind of the dilution, as I would call it, of certain major lines of comics. I mean, the Spider books obviously is a good example. X-Men titles, there's like a gajillion of them right now. The pricing of the trade paperbacks, they start, I think, at what, $19.99 or $29.99 in some cases, and retailers were pointing out that Image, for example, I mean, their first volumes of a collection are usually $10, and then they go to $15. So in over the course of this conversation, a couple of very significant things were said that have spurred some controversy. The big one is from Marvel's Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing, David Gabriel, who made a comment which has since they've kind of backtracked it and said that it was taken out of context, which is saying that the diversity of their characters might be in tune with why it's not selling. So diversity doesn't sell, and we've seen obviously, Sam Wilson is Captain America, Jane Foster is Thor, Kamala Khan, not Kamala Khan, Kamala, is it Khan? No.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Okay. I was like, is it Kamala Harris? No, that's the senator from California. just getting confused with real world things here, Dan. Kamala Khan with Miss Marvel. I mean, so it was kind of, I mean, and from my understanding, Dan, there was some pushback even from the retailers there saying, well, no, the diverse characters are actually bringing new readers into comic book stores. So that was kind of the really big thing that kind of struck a nerve with a lot of people, because it's, that comment out of context or whatever, it's kind of plays into what I would consider the dark corners of the internet, where we always see where these new characters debut. There's this pushback. We've covered it on SuperiorSpiderTalk.com, Dan. In terms of can we have a non-Caucasian Peter Parker? And we know.
I think Brian wrote that article.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. It kind of plays into that idea of, you see, this is why we shouldn't just have the way things were in the good old days. A lot of people did not take to that well. There have been articles all over the place discussing this, and then kind of less, to me, controversial, but just interesting to note, in terms of the topic of event fatigue. They did announce that following Secret Empire, which that's going to come out, May or June?
Yeah, I think it starts in May.
We're apparently going to go 18 months before the next major event. So,
hallelujah!
Wow. I mean, I'm kind of shocked by that.
Ben just kind of confirmed that on your show, Brian.
He did.
So, that's a lot to talk about here. And Dan, Brian, obviously, we've heard your perspectives on this topic in the past, in terms of what you obviously talk about on your show, and then also with that infamous column that you wrote for Superior Spider Talk. But Dan, also, I know you're working in comics right now for an indie label, so you probably have some things, and I'm just a guy with a microphone talking right now. So
well, you're the core comic audience.
Yeah, I'm the angry guy in his basement, right? No. I mean, where do you want to start? Because I have, I mean, if you want to talk about to start, why don't you think Marvel is selling as well as it did? I have some specific ideas to that, but do you want to just tackle the diversity topic first? What you guys lead the way, and I'll jump in.
I think diversity is the biggest thing, because I think the diversity thing plays into a lot of why their books aren't selling, not necessarily because of diversity, but because of not only how it was handled, but also like what the diversity of their lines look like.
Yes, I think that's pretty.
So wait, tell me more about that. So you're not talking about specifically like ethnicities and things, are you? Or what do you?
I mean, I don't think anybody is not picking up like the new Thor book because it's a female Thor. You know, I mean, of course, there's going to be those people that are like that. But if the sales are down hugely on Thor, and it's a great book. I mean, I'll say off the bat, I read every Marvel book that they publish on Marvel Unlimited, which is insane. I acknowledge. But I really wanted to get a sense of this, you know, all their titles after Secret Wars, because it seemed like a real great time to get in on kind of a ton of different franchises and get a feel for what Marvel with free reign to reboot every line would be like. And I think there's some real amazing creativity going on at Marvel right now, and a lot of books that are really amazing that no one is reading. Like, Mark, I remember I recommended to you Uncanny Avengers, the second arc with Ultron. I love that story. No one is talking about Hank Pym coming back as Ultron. And there's good reason for that. And I think it's just that there's a number of things. To the diversity angle, no, I don't think anybody's not really picking up the book because it's a female Thor. But I think the way they went about it, the entire line of Marvel books, all of their main heroes have been replaced. And often in ways that I don't know if they were intended to piss off the core readers, but it seems like a mandate. Like, Thor was made unworthy. Iron Man was put in a coma. Bruce Banner was murdered. Like, maybe Spider-Man is the only one where the transition to this legacy character was handled with any kind of respect, I think, towards the original character. What do you guys think about that?
Well, that's just because Spider-Man already had his, like, the piss off moment with his character getting replaced.
Yeah. And I think I wonder if this and to ask you guys a second question, do you think that this is all related to the reception of Superior Spider-Man? Because it kind of showed that they could sell books by being edgy and taking risks with their characters. So those are the two questions.
I think there's definitely an element of that there, you know, in terms of the controversy, and people get very vocal about it, but Marvel knows, like, you're going to read it anyway. But then on the flip side, it's like, I also, like, I get frustrated because I don't know, I have the attitude that it's comic books, right? So what is ever permanent? So I get frustrated with, like, the old school fans, like, you know, this is ultimately temporary, and if you're going to change it up a little bit, like, isn't that just the nature? Like, Wolverine died. We all know he's going to come back, you know, at some point. Spider-Man died, which is what created your show in the first place. You know, you knew picking it up, he's going to come back. But there's an interesting story to tell. And I find, like, that's more interesting to me, just the journey of it. And so if you change up all the characters, to me, that makes it more accessible to people. I buy into that argument. Like, the whole comic should be for everyone. And so when you start fresh, when you start trying to reflect the world around you and handle it with care, I've seen some books handle it better than others. I don't know. I don't really get the frustration, because you brought up Marvel Unlimited. It's like, it's not like there's any shortage of material to go through and discover or rediscover.
I agree with you. I mean, like, I love Captain America right now. You know, like, I think both Captain America books are great. I'm just saying, like, I feel like it for those people who are looking for a narrative, like, of Marvel, like, shoving diversity down their throats or whatever, I feel like Marvel, like, has given them exactly that narrative to latch onto.
Yeah, I mean, for me too, it's not even just about. No, I don't think someone is not reading a book because Thor is a woman or Captain America is black, but there does need to be, I think, an organic shift in these characters, and I feel like Marvel has kind of forgone that, not even just with these diversity characters. I mean, in a lot of instances, I mean, Secret Wars became, I think, a big, that whole 8-month later jump. Like, to me, like, Marvel will paint it as, oh, there's all these unique situations and you don't even know how we got here. To me, that's just lazy writing, because it's just it's not organic evolution for these characters. And I think that probably pissed some people off, because then it does feel like it's a mandate. It's something that's being shoved down your throat, where, like we talk about Superior. I mean, like, that was something that was building and building and building. And it seemed right at the time. With Thor, now I know Thor was pre-Secret Wars, but it was just, the end of Original Sin, Odin's son was just determined not worthy anymore. It just came out of nowhere, right? There was no build to that. There was no rhyme or reason to it. Was there? Am I forgetting something?
No, there wasn't.
No, it was plot convenience theater.
Yeah. And okay, I know with Sam Wilson, Cap, he was aging, but now, like, and then this is to the other point of it too, is, and we've seen Marvel do this in other eras of where frankly they've been on the decline. They're still trying to, like, have their cake and eat it too. I mean, there are 2 Captain America books right now. There's a Sam Wilson and a Steve Rogers book. There are like 8 Spider-Man books with 8 different Spider-Man characters right now. And
or even the main Spider-Man book. How many continuities can you have? Because you've got what Dan Slott is doing in Amazing, but you miss you want Peter to be married to MJ again. You got Renew Your Vows. You want to go back to high school. You've got the Chip Starsky book that's coming up. So that's exactly right. Like, you can have it all different ways. So that goes back to what you were saying, Dan, in terms of the diversity of the line, or maybe even lack of diversity of the line. Like, you're flooding your market now. That's
like DC for a while before their rebirth was. I mean, they're still kind of this way. But they were almost like half their line was Batman books. And if you don't like Batman, or you're not, like, super into Batman, you're not going to read any of those ancillary titles. Like, we look at, like, Marvel's best books aren't even given it, like, aren't really even given a time to shine. Like, look at, like, Mockingbird, a great book, an excellent book. We get a dozen issues maybe of that book. It's just drowned out by all this other content. Like, if I'm a Spider-Man fan, I guess I'm going to buy the Spider-Man books. It doesn't give me a lot of room to kind of find something else that I love. I mean, I grant that I could go pick up whatever. Like, Spider-Woman, I think, is one of Marvel's best books they've ever published, but it was never really given a platform to succeed. It's just drowned out by Silk and Spider-Gwen and all these. Like, they're all operating under the same idea.
Yeah, and then, like, I was just say, like, I mean, okay, maybe Spider-Woman is his own thing, but certainly, like, the concurrent launching of Spider-Gwen and Silk made no sense to me. Like, pick one, like, you want one young Spider female character, pick one. Like, why do we need 2 different books that kind of are essentially going for the same kind of thing?
I think the argument is still, like you're saying, Mark, is pick one because the market can't support more than one. Because we would love to have more than one.
Yes, but I think what we're seeing is that Marvel is diluting its own line. It's watering everything down in an attempt to, I think, and maybe this is they have creators that they want to push. They want to give people an opportunity to do these books, but none of these books are doing more than like 20,000 units right now with a lot of these, like, secondary titles. I mean, it's like, it's crazy. I mean, I don't know if you take away Silk and just have Spider-Gwen if you're going to get twice as many people buying Spider-Gwen. But, like, I have to think it would still be more, right? I don't know. I mean, or like, you know, they bring Miles into the 616, and he's kind of like he's your teenage Spider-Man the way, you know, it's supposed to be. And then at the same time, they launch Spidey, you know, which is teenage Peter Parker, you know, like it's you're shooting yourself in the foot. I feel like if you're Marvel and you're doing this, it's like they're not truly committing to the idea. They're just trying to push as much product as possible, and it ends up looking like they're trying to check a couple of boxes instead of like really believing in an idea and making that the idea.
Well, let me throw this out there because it's in some ways it also seems like it could be a can't win situation. So you mentioned earlier, not Kamala Harris, Kamala Khan, who is runaway success for Marvel, a new character, Muslim superhero, but she's Miss Marvel. You know, you still have a Captain Marvel. You have Carol Danvers around. You've got Miles. You've got Peter. I'm trying to think of and the sort of angry fan arguments like, oh, why don't you just create your own character instead of, you know, repurposing, quote, ours? And so I'm trying to think of like the last original minority character, and I think it might be Mosaic. Mm-hmm. And is anyone reading that book? Has it really gotten a push in any way? I can't really tell because it's such a sometimes, you know, it's like trying to drink from a fire hose. There's so much product out there, but Mosaic came and I thought it was interesting art. It's an interesting concept and story, and yet I never hear anything about that book at all. And they even brought Spider-Man into it, or, you know, he had turned himself into Spidey for an issue, just hopefully to get it. You know, the cynical side of me says to get a little bit of a sales boost, to get some attention, but I don't know what the answer is to create your own heroes, or if you're trying to reflect that market, is there another way to do it? Because with that example anyway, it didn't seem to take off. But then when you do stuff like you change Thor, you change Cap, you still have that brand, that mantle you can hang it on.
What does it mean to have Spidey appear in your book these days when he's appearing in a dozen books a month? Does that actually affect your sales in any regard other than like the Doc Spideys of the world who buy every appearance of the character?
Well, there you go. Maybe it's like a Hail Mary pass, you know.
Spider chronology.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I mean, I will say, like, Kamala Khan's book sells really well.
Digitally,
yeah, right? No, not in the direct market at all. Squirrel Girl doesn't sell at all in the direct market, but it sells great in bookstores and digitally.
Now, here's something kind of to that point, and again, playing with the diversity thing, and this is something where, like, I'm thinking of Miles when I'm kind of levying this criticism. So, Kamala Khan, to me, is a really great way of bringing a diverse character and a new kind of voice into the market, because she's Marvel's first Muslim American hero, and when I haven't read it since the relaunch. That's something I do need to catch up on. But like when I read that series originally, like I liked how like that book felt a lot like the old school Spider-Man book, except with the coloring of this Muslim American family and the problems that come with that, and it felt like it leveraged its diverse cast really well to tell unique stories. And in a lot of these other instances where I feel like where we have these new characters, these diverse characters, like I don't actually feel like they're utilizing the diversity of the characters to tell new stories. Like I don't like. Do you feel like Miles is really? I mean, there was that one arc in the beginning where, you know, Miles was kind of ticked off that they commented on his skin being brown on the news, or on Twitter or whatever it was. But like, I don't know. Like, I don't read Miles and feel like it's authentically like a Latin, half Latino, half black superhero besides the fact that that's just how his skin is colored in the book. And maybe it shouldn't be that. I don't know. But like, do you feel like they could be doing more with that? Should they be doing more with that? Is it then even more obnoxious if they do more with it? I mean, where do you guys stand on that?
I think that comes down to your writer, right? I mean, the reason people know about Miss Marvel, I mean, she got the press because you hang that PR line that, oh my gosh, it's a Muslim American superhero, and what does that mean in today's world? But then it's powered by G. Willow Wilson, who has that experience and voice and can bring that through. And, we talked with Bendis in our interview about race and stuff, but his experience is unique. He's not, he hasn't lived that life. So how can that come through? I did read a preview of, there's a Miles Morales young adult novel coming up later this year that's written by Jason Reynolds, who is an African-American author, young guy too. I think he's in his probably late 20s, early 30s, and used the word authentic. I mean, just the 3 chapters I read, that it was night and day. It just felt like Brooklyn, and that, that experience of that neighborhood and that living situation and those cultures and everything, just, it felt more immediate and real. And that's not a knock against Bendis. I mean, you write what you know, and if you only know so much, that's going to come through in the work.
I agree with you about that, Brian. I just feel like Miles should be more than like Peter Parker too, and I feel like, not to pick on that character too much, and we get things like his abuela appearing in the book, but I really want something unique from that book. And when he's fighting Black Cat and traveling the multiverse, it really, to me, seems like a real betrayal of the core idea of that book, which I don't think was ever sharper than like the Uncle Aaron stories, or even the beginning story, Miles' first story with the Brooklyn Academy. And that stuff has taken such a background. Like if I want to read another Spider-Man book, I'm hoping that it gives me a different perspective on, the character or what it means to be a superpowered character. Like, I don't know. I don't need it to like, have Miles joining a gang and playing into the worst stereotypes, of Black and Latino culture. But like, I would like to see what makes Miles' life unique from Peter's. And I mean, even the voice, oftentimes I feel like it's written the same as Peter in that book. And not to be too critical on Bendis, because I'm still enjoying the book, and I thought this last issue was pretty solid. I think this is true of a lot of these characters. They just aren't doing something unique enough with, like Mark said, with their new mantle on the character. Like, you could not, and I don't think, for all the problems we have with Slott, I don't think you could say that about, like, Superior. The minute a different person was in that body, it couldn't have been more different of a book and shown us a more different perspective on the world.
Yeah, I mean, and to kind of play into what you just said, Dan, and then what Brian was saying, I mean, I'm glad that you mentioned like not playing into the stereotypes, but I do wonder when they have these writers on these books who have not lived these experiences, does it kind of drive the book into this kind of cautious tone of, well, I can only write what I know, and if I go too far in one direction, is it going to come across as cliched or trite or playing into a stereotype or whatever? So then you just kind of get milquetoast, yeah, I don't think we want to see Miles in a gang, with the Latin Kings or something. But I do think maybe, if you have a Latino or a Black writer on Miles, maybe there are just more subtle things that would just give the character a different voice and make him stand out in more subtle but distinct ways.
I think just to stick up for Miles for a second, and Bendis too.
You should. That's why you're here.
I feel like a core thing that was making him different from Peter Parker, and we saw it all the way back in the beginning with Uncle Aaron. I mean, as the series goes on, we learn about his dad and his relationship, Jefferson's relationship with Aaron and their past. And it was pretty shady, and choices were made, and there's a lot of regret about that. Jefferson went one way and Aaron went the other. And when Miles became Spider-Man, and then there was that battle where Aaron died, I mean, his last words to him were something along the lines of, well, you're just like me. And that's Jefferson's biggest fear. He does not want Miles to go down that path. So I feel like there are some interesting seeds sown there, and they kind of started to play out. And then something that we've talked about on our show many times is just the narrative gets interrupted because Marvel is doing an event. And so you've got to work your script around that. And then the United States is in the middle of a civil war, or Galactus arrives and the entire world is ending. And then you try to get back to it. And through that, Bendis was kind of trying to rethread that line of Jefferson's struggles with, coming to terms with his past and coming to terms with Miles as being a better person, or possibly a better person than he is, and having to realize that, and still being worried about him. And then how does that work post Secret Wars and this reboot? And it seems now, if we really are getting a year and a half free of crossovers, I'm really hoping that particular plot line can take off, because I think that would really set this character apart. Just Peter as Uncle Ben, who is this, moral compass, or who set the philosophy down that's his moral compass. But Miles didn't quite have that. Miles's heritage or family connections is a lot more complicated, and it's something that he doesn't want to be. He's running away from. I think that's kind of cool and very different. I'd like to see. I hope he can. Just to throw one more metaphor in there, I hope Bendis can grab that ball and run with it.
I hope so too. I really think there's a lot of promise in Miles Morales that I've just been eagerly awaiting for years to see kind of pay off. Like, Aaron has not been mentioned in I couldn't even tell you how long.
Yeah, I mean, I do think bringing Miles into the 616 has hurt the character more than helped it. I mean, I don't know why that has to be, but it just feels that way because, yeah, I mean, the stuff you're talking about, Brian. I mean, like was that all basically Ultimate stuff? I mean, Ultimate Universe stuff.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So do you guys want to wrap up our thoughts on this? Like, I think we can all say diversity isn't hurting Marvel's sales. Like, that concept of diversity isn't what's hurting their sales, because this is really all about their sales. Like, what is it about this that, like, what do we think is hurting their sales? The dilution of their lines? Is that what we're taking away?
Yeah. I mean, that, and I think we were starting to touch on event fatigue.
Yeah, so we're going to get into that.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, I'd mentioned events is affecting Miles's book for years now.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a single book that they do now, Dan, and Brian. There's not a single book that they do now where the narrative isn't, truncated by an event. And, you really got to go back to, the blessing and the curse of like the mid to late 2000s where, Marvel was just on fire, where, it went from, was it House of M to Civil War to Secret Invasion to Siege, which were all for the most part, or Dark Avengers to Siege. I mean, they were all generally highly regarded company-wide events that told some interesting stories, had some interesting twists. But, since then, it just seems like, Marvel just keeps going back to that well, trying to recapture that magic. And, I mean, I think we all more or less liked Secret Wars, but like that almost felt like what's his name, Hickman, trying to wrap up his Fantastic Four narrative from a few years earlier, and P.S. Fantastic Four is not even around anymore. So, but like, the other kind of like big Avengers-y type or X-Men type events, they just have not hit the mark that way, and it's almost like rather than trying to move on and go in a different direction. Marvel just has been doubling down the last 5 or 6 years on no, we need to get back there. I mean, they even did Civil War II. That's how much they doubled down to get back to the glory days of the events. And Civil War II is a disaster.
I don't know if you remember, but Secret Wars being the flagship event, and then it did not roll out very smoothly, right? They had extended it by 1 issue, and then the schedule slipped. And so the Marvel Universe had relaunched, even though it hadn't ended yet.
Yeah. And wasn't there even...
The same is true with Civil War II.
Right.
And wasn't that one of the things that got brought up during the summit in relation to, like... And, they were talking about, well, what if you got different artists to do different installments of the like what they did for AVX. Basically, they had different creative teams that kind of strung something together, and AVX for the most part stayed on target. But then Marvel's editorial were kind of like, well, yeah, but we find that when we change up creative teams, the sales dip. They're not steady. But basically what the retailers were saying is, you have one event kicking off before the other one ends because the other one isn't ending when the time it's supposed to, because there's delays, and generally the delays are usually on the art end. So how do you reconcile that? I mean, maybe not just have so many events back to back to back to back so that you don't run into that timeline thing, but is there a way to, while you're in the midst of the event, to do it in a way where it stays on time?
And Civil War II is kind of the perfect storm of all this, because, I know Secret Wars involved most of their titles, but they rebooted things for miniseries. But Civil War II was essentially every book in the Marvel line had to tie into this book. And when you've got, the reveal of Tony's, quote-unquote death appearing in books months before it happens in the main story, you're ruining your main story, and the other books don't make any friggin' sense. And everybody has to kind of tread water. That happened in Spider-Man, right, Brian? He had to add in an extra title of filler just to kind of pad the book out. And meanwhile, everything is super loosely connected to this thing because they don't know when they can do stuff. So Ulysses is popping up in every book, and people don't like Civil War II, so all of a sudden you're not liking any book you're reading.
Yeah, and the joke was, Dan, we liked that Spider-Man Civil War II tie-in, but I mean, that's the other thing. How often do we get these little tie-in minis into books that are throwaway garbage? It goes back to diluting the line. It's just like another book to pick up, and when you're on a budget, you gotta make tough decisions. I mean, and is Marvel wasting its time? I mean, did that Civil War II mini sell at all for Spider-Man?
I think it sold okay. Not as well as I think the quality would have, should have determined. It was better than the main book as far as I'm concerned. And I know a lot of our listeners, and I can only speak in terms of our downloads. That's one of our lower downloaded episodes because I don't think anybody read it. And if you're listening to this show right now, you are a hardcore Spider-Man fan. Let me tell you what.
You have to go deep on the internet to find us.
Well, not everybody wants to listen to an hour about Spider-Man every week. Right now, a lot of people are rethinking their life choices while listening to this.
Oh boy. But I mean, and actually we're not quite out of the woods yet, right? Because we've got Secret Empire. What'd you say, Mark? May? Is that when it's starting?
Yeah.
But then we also have another thing, a 10-part series called Generations that's starting in July.
So they're already lying.
So
yeah.
I don't know how they're interconnected, but it's another series. So I don't know.
Well, that's going to be like a max. Is that like a maxi book kind of a thing? Like kind of what essentially like what the original Secret Wars was? I mean,
or if it's a series, I'm not quite sure what it is, if it's a series of one-offs, but nevertheless, it's another event in quotes that, it's like a big promotional push they're going to be doing. So again, it's is that as cool as it sounds, the fatigue is almost inevitable because it's it's another thing I got to
Now, to the point of events, and I consider these events, whether Marvel wants to or not, but and this was another thing that got brought up in the summit, but this idea of the rebooting and restarting books. Like, I mean, Dan, you and I mean, because we're kind of psychotic collectors. I mean, we would buy this Amazing Spider-Man if it was issue volume 4, number 1, or if it was issue 773. You know what I mean? Like we don't have any our tastes aren't discerning in that regard. But like, you know, it is amazing to me how, you know, Marvel seemed. You had the New 52 in DC, which I think was kind of the big reboot, and you know those books were riding high for a little while until things kind of equalized. And I think, and you know, Marvel then kind of followed up with, was that the original Marvel Now? Was that the first of like the really line wide reboots?
Yeah, I think Marvel Now is it? Yeah.
Yep.
And Marvel kind of, you know, after that overtook DC again, and you know was riding high for a really long time until DC's did Rebirth. But now, like, it looks like DC is not yielding that ground back, and Marvel has since restarted its series 2-3 more times since the original Marvel Now, which was 2013. I mean, like,
well, I love that you can say the original Marvel Now, because in that time they did another Marvel Now.
All new Marvel Now, right? So.
Yeah, and it's like, to me that becomes fatiguing too. I mean, like it's like, oh, okay, you know, and this whole thing like, oh, our comics are they're like TV series, and I do think it's interesting that the legacy numbering is coming back in some instances, because I think Marvel is acknowledging that was a poor strategy. Like, I mean, like, yeah, you get that fix from a number 1 issue, but then the sales just drop like a stone after that. Like, right. You know, like,
well, readers would find it more as a jumping off point than a jumping on point.
Right.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how long the resurgence of the old numbering lasts. Even though, I mean, like, you know, will it become every 25 issues is the big 25th or 50th issue? Are they surrendering to the core audience? Because like that's my new fear is, like, you know, DC Rebirth went back to kind of their classics, you know, like, and we're like, okay, core audience, we really need you, and they got that boost from their core again, and brought DC back, you know, from, you know, lackluster sales. But it clearly didn't last very long. The core audience only like really sustained all those books for only so long, and they have a much more limited lineup than Marvel does. Does a return to this old numbering really just kind of throw a bone to this core audience and nobody else?
I don't know. I mean, I guess we have to see. But I mean, I do see the concerns about, well, where's the, you know, where's the jumping on point for casual fans? But I mean, at the same token, I don't know if restarting a series every 8 months. I mean, you know, we had a couple of books, not just a couple. We had a number of books that, like, what, had like 5 issues before rebooting again after Secret Wars. I mean, that's absurd.
Yeah, Spider-Gwen was one of those.
Yeah, I mean, and didn't we have like the Superior Iron Man, and what did that last? Right. 4 issues?
I forgot that.
Well, my favorite was Howard the Duck, because it had a number 1 on the front, and it said like, no, not the number 1 we did 4 months ago.
Yeah.
You know, like,
didn't Squirrel Girl do something like that too? Like, they made fun of rebooting again like so soon.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. I just wanted to kind of like to springboard off my question, and this is not me answering my own question, but like, I really think Marvel and DC and these publishers have kind of got themselves into like a weird place, because they want to expand their audience, you know, like any company does, and now that Marvel's kind of like cultural footprint is so big, you know, they're kind of getting this push to do so, but you know, your comics, the real problem is this. There are two big publishers in comics, and they basically sell the same exact thing, and that model relies on consistency from a core group of audience, because retailers are not outfitted with the ability to recommend product to new people. There's just too many books. Like, no retailer has the resources to tell you about the smaller books, and I don't know what the answer to that is. Like, Marvel can expand their audience in Barnes & Noble, where they can kind of get to that kind of broader audience, and maybe even digital is the answer to that too. Although I feel like the Comixology app wall is super confusing, but I don't know how you bring on more people than your core audience, which is what you rely on to sell those books, because nobody else is going to discover them, and retailers don't know how to recommend them. But the only way to do that, I think, is to abandon that core audience, and I don't think anybody's willing to do that right now.
I'll throw out a potential idea to improve your audience. Pricing.
Yeah, well, that was brought up too.
Because I'm giving away my age here, but I'm of that generation where comic books were in the line at the grocery store, right? And they were super cheap, less than $1. So my mom and dad could just grab an issue or two and throw them in with the cart. It was not a big deal. But comics now, $3.99 a pop. I mean, that's intimidating, and you can't win. If it's issue 1, you'll give it a chance, but then do you want to commit, or do you want to wait for the trade, or do you learn about Marvel Unlimited and go that route? I don't know.
I mean, one of the problems associated with that is the distribution. You've got Diamond, who basically, not even basically, it's a monopoly. They're the only distributor, and they take a huge cut of your profits and only offer you, placement in previews if you do a select number, a certain number of orders and things like that. Although, Mark, your book was in previews, which is totally nuts and bonkers to me.
That's awesome.
And I swear I did not pay. I don't think I paid extra for that.
I hope you went out and got a copy of previews.
You know what? I didn't. I should get one.
I mean, I went out and bought one. I was like, I have to have this. This is so weird.
I'll get one.
But I just don't know. The only way that you can start bringing that cost down, is getting Diamond out of the business. But you can't compete against Diamond; they have such a stranglehold on it. So literally, a competitor would have to come out of nowhere, and begin to push this. And the prices could be kept low. I think they could probably be lower, but I think the real answer to that is just getting rid of Diamond altogether and going digital. But then Marvel is sacrificing their core audience with getting rid of the retailers, which is what this is all about. It's all headed to this one fundamental point where somebody just says, forget print comics, we're going digital and making the price $1.99, because we don't have to deal with Diamond anymore. But in the process, they alienate everybody. So it's we're caught in between, and Marvel is trying to, as painlessly as possible, get their audience to go digital without pissing off retailers who are still getting pissed off, hence this whole, conference.
Yeah. And I mean, not for nothing, digital, taking out Diamond and the retailers, going digital would solve a lot of issues. But I mean, just like with regular books and music and everything, there's still always going to be an audience for floppies. It may not be the main audience, but there is a segment that are just not going to buy either all their books or certain books digitally because they want that feeling of the tactile feeling. And would you shut that segment of your audience out? You know what I mean?
No, but you can make them pay a more expensive price. Right now digital is at price parity with floppies. But I bet if you made digital $1.99 and kept your floppies at $3.99, it would totally cannibalize that market. People would learn to love digital pretty fast.
No, that's. I mean,
Image. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go. You.
I was going to say, Image does that on Comixology, so their issues will come out at $2.99, and if you're willing to wait a month, they all drop to $1.99.
Right.
The print issue is the print issue. The digital is they do it separately.
And I totally abuse the hell out of that. I wait a month on all my Image books.
Sure, same here.
I mean, I just buy the trades with Image.
I don't blame you because those trades are $10.
They're reasonably priced. Yeah. I mean, like, and that's the thing. I mean, there are books with Image that I would probably never read otherwise, but $10 for 5 or 6 issues of a new book. If like I'll give it a chance for 10. I mean, $10 was my issue of Spider-Man last month. I mean, I know we like to make jokes about that one issue, but the fact of the matter is, it's like I'm much more willing to take a chance on a series if I feel like I'm getting some potential bang for my buck. I mean, even at $14.99. I mean, at least at that point, like, you usually kind of like the series at that point. Like if you bought the first book and got it for $10, and they make a keeper, then you're willing to pay more. But it's even still cheap. It still feels like a bargain. Whereas, I mean, Marvel. I mean, I have Marvel Unlimited, so there's no need for me to buy a trade of it anyway. But like, $20 for, and Marvel seemed pretty adamant about the fact that they would not move off those price points because they don't, they basically don't want to cannibalize their single issue sales, right? I mean, that was kind of their response to that. Their fear was if they lowered the price point on their collections, people will just say, we'll just do what I'm essentially doing with Marvel Unlimited, which is screw it, I'll just wait 6 months.
What about moving to launching series as digital only?
I don't know how that would work out. I mean, I'd be very curious about that. I mean, I don't think that any of the motion comics have really moved the dial all that much, but I don't think they've ever really been given the kind of like A-list talent,
right?
Like that would really move and shake things. I think about your question like alongside the new like Star Trek Discovery show, right? The only way you're going to be able to watch the new Star Trek is by getting the CBS monthly service. And how many people are going to do that for just Star Trek? I don't know. It's a very complicated world, comic sales. And, I just spent the past weekend selling comics at a con. And, I mean, the other thing to just acknowledge is there aren't a lot of people that read comic books. It is a small audience. And, and the competition gets like worse every day, even from within the companies. Like, if you like superheroes, man, guess what? You can go and see a movie and get all the superhero fix you could possibly want. For some people, obviously, the three of us, that's not true. We are all dyed-in-the-wool junkies.
Yeah, I think it was. You mentioned the Times article earlier. There was one in the Guardian that basically referred to Marvel as Disney's R&D department.
I don't see why it's not. Like one movie makes more than all of Marvel's comic books make in a year. And Guardians of the Galaxy would never exist if some dude somewhere didn't take a bizarre chance of writing a book with those characters in it. I don't see why they're so precious of their comic stuff. Like, why? Yeah, have it be your R&D, keep the prices low, build your core audience, and then activate them on the movies where you make $1 bajillion.
$1 bajillion. Could they spare $1 million to fix the Marvel Unlimited app? Sorry.
It's a lot better than it used to be, that's for sure.
Oh, look, I just downloaded an issue and it's only 3 pages.
Ready for my commute. Perfect.
Oh, yeah, I haven't been caught up on Miss Marvel because I literally cannot read one issue of Miss Marvel. It's like blocked. I cannot access it.
Oh, that's good to know. Maybe then I won't be checking it out soon.
It works on my internet browser, just not on my iPad. Interesting. Yeah.
All right. Anything else on this sales thing? I mean, I know that we could go forever on this, but since I'm
just three old dudes complaining about comics.
Aren't you glad you downloaded this?
Look, this is a bonus episode.
That's right.
Yeah,
it's somebody's
This is giving back.
It's somebody's commute or somebody's.
They're not paying us $3.99 for this. You'll take what you get.
Right. Well, we're gonna put it behind the paywall, right, Dan?
Yeah, right.
This is a reward. A special thank you.
Yeah. We're angry dudes. Now pay us for this. So let's talk about some comments and emails.
All right, Dan and Brian. Well, as you know, we love hearing from you guys, even, especially after an episode like this. I'm sure some of you all have opinions. And the way you get those opinions to us, well, first you can email us at amazingspidertalk@gmail.com. You can rate and review us on all of our various services, which include iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube. Leave us those ratings, leave us those reviews. They help grow our audience. You can tweet at us and hashtag it OK to print, or you can call 9 Red Goblin. We're not going to do it in this segment, but we got an interesting call lately there, Dan. So if you want to talk and leave a voicemail for us, call 9 Red Goblin. But we do have this one. Is this an email, Dan, or is this this must be an email because I don't see a rating attached to it from Daryl Lahi?
I think you got it, Mark.
Woo! You want me to read this one?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Daryl writes, I have a couple of questions for you as fellow comic collectors, as I tend to be the minority in my circle of friends when it comes to my collecting habits. So they want to know what the end game is in regards to your personal collections. You both boast having complete runs of ASM, no small achievement, but let me give you a little background as to why I asked this question. Comics for me have always been first about the art, then the story, and always lurking in the back of my mind is the value of my collection. Over the course of my collecting days, especially when I was younger, my cash flow would run dry and I would be in desperate need of money. My collections were always there to bail me out like a backup bank account. Nowadays, I'm older and don't run into as many money issues as when I was younger, but the idea still sits there in the back of my mind, so perhaps it's become more of a retirement savings account or something I leave to my daughter when I pass, not likely very soon. Well, that's good to hear. So I build my collection on items that I believe will resell well as the ones that I want to read. Has anything like this ever crossed your mind? Interesting.
That's a good question.
Yeah. It's funny, like, Dan, for me, I've had people ask, I kind of always get like a little huffy when someone asks me how much my collection's worth.
Mostly because you don't want to admit it to yourself?
Well, there's that, but like, it's also like, for me, it's kind of irrelevant because it doesn't matter how much it's worth because I have no intentions of reselling it.
Yeah, it's invaluable.
Yeah, I mean, maybe for insurance purposes, I should get it. I should get it valuated. But I guess the end game for me is just, I have a 5-year-old boy who loves Spider-Man. I mean, maybe one day he could get joy out of these things. But I have no other end game beyond that. I haven't thought that hardcore about it. You, Dan?
I'm the same way. I mean, I don't really ever intend on selling it. I mean, I could see if I was in like a desperate financial strait, and I definitely thought like, hey, I'm trying to make my own graphic novel. If I sold my comics, I wouldn't have to do any fundraising. Like, I could just make the graphic novel that I want, and what's more valuable to me, that, group of comics sitting in a closet or like a creation of my own. But
you could just sell your annuals. I mean, they're pretty useless.
That might have been the deepest dig yet.
Ouch.
Ouch. I don't know how to recover from that. That might just have to be
fired.
That might have to be the end of the episode right there.
Let me give you some aloe for that burn.
Oh man. Yeah, I mean, I guess I could, Mark. You know, like, I don't know. I don't ever plan on selling it. You know, it's just they're too personal to me. You know, each one's a story. Maybe not as storied as yours, Mark. You've made your career out of that.
I make the stories the story.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel the same exact way as you do, Mark. I just don't intend on getting rid of them. And I think I'll definitely pare it down as time goes on. Like, I don't feel like I need every B book that I've bought. I'll probably consolidate those somewhere and pass those along, and it will probably get smaller and to be just Amazing Spider-Man comics. But it's a lifelong hobby, and I don't see that ending. And I don't know if I'll have kids. I'd love to pass it on to a kid if I do have kids that happen to be into comics, or kids that happen to be into big lump sums of money that they suddenly find themselves in.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. Brian, do you have any thoughts on this?
I'm not a collector, but you know, I can appreciate like what both you guys said. Like, it's not about the money; it's just the enjoyment you get out of it. But that said, I'm curious. Like, so obviously you can't take it with you. So Mark, you mentioned, you know, your son, and if they went to him at some point. I mean, do either of you guys have strong thoughts like the collection should stay together, or once they're out of your hands, they're out of your hands, and whatever happens? The heart that went into building those collections, like a lot was invested in. And I don't mean strictly the financial sense. So after all that, you know, do you have that kind of emotional attachment once you hand it on, like as to the fate of the collection?
You know, I think there's a part of me where if I was to, you know, if it was like an inheritance type of situation with my son, that I would, like, if he like turned around and immediately resold them, I would probably like try and haunt him from the grave or something. But I mean, at the same token, I mean, like, I can't, you know, there might be some unique circumstances where, you know, either he needs, you know, would need the money, or that money could be put to something that would bring him even greater happiness than that you know, that collection brought me, and, you know, I would never want to deprive him of that. So, you know, yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess it is kind of, you know, once it's out of my hands, it's in his hands. But
I do love the idea, Mark, of you just haunting your comic collection.
I'd be like Ghost Peter, Crazy Town Banana Pants.
That's horrifying.
He sold my issue 3.
You're a very cheery ghost.
Yeah, it's like
well, you know, that Ghost Peter was pretty cheery. You know, I will not let you do that. Anyway,
I'm very interested that this is how you read all of Superior Spider-Man, is with this kind of vocal intonation.
I need to reread it now.
Yeah.
Well, rereading Superior 1 just kind of brought it all back then, you know? Yeah, you just can't speak to the circumstances. But, I mean, you know, all things created equal, and if everyone's doing okay and doesn't need the money, I would hope that, you know, it could be just something that just goes on and on and on until, you know, until we inevitably get wiped out by global warming or something. And then nobody gets anything.
Right.
Yeah, right. Nobody gets to have fun.
Thanks, global warming.
That's kind of your ideal way to end the collection, right? Like, I had fun with it, now nobody else gets it.
Exactly. I mean, Dan, you know me pretty well. Isn't that kind of how I am?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. Pretty accurate. Well, I'm going to close down this chapter of this kind of like sobering look at our, you know, frailty and mortality. Let's talk about some spider news.
Give me pictures of the Spider-Man. I need something that's front page news. I want to see him slinging those webs around. I want to make him look like a fool. We need to get this vigilante. Let's up the ante. Take off his mask. Give me some spider news.
That's the most glumly anyone has ever talked about the word spider news.
Spider news.
Well, Dan, I mean, you know, I don't know if this is glum or not, but we got a new Spider-Man Homecoming trailer, I thought it was a big improvement over the first one. What did you guys think?
Brian?
I was actually kind of bummed out because I felt like I saw the whole movie.
Yeah, I heard that from a lot of people that they felt it was too spoilery.
Yeah, I agree with Brian. I felt like if they had just shown us that he lost the costume, it would have been enough for me to go, oh, I see what they're doing here, and go, I want to see that. And to me, that was the highlight of the trailer, is kind of having my assumptions confirmed that they were doing like Amazing Spider-Man #1, the comic in the movie, where it's like he wants to join the super team and ends up making a menace of himself. I don't know how they do that without the Daily Bugle. I'm guessing Tony Stark is their kind of like stand-in for that, but I thought that was the most interesting thing about the trailer. I thought the Vulture looked really great in this trailer too, but I was dismayed seeing things like a plane crash, which I'm like, to me that's like superhero movie go-to, is we got to do a plane crash. In fact, we had one in Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Sure.
We have one in every Superman movie. It's just kind of like, I don't feel like I need to see Spider-Man affecting things on that level of consequence.
Yeah, he just rescued a space shuttle in his very first solo issue of Spider-Man, but that's okay.
But that's different than like a 747.
A plane.
I mean, like, it's different than like hundreds of lives.
Fair enough. It was just a space shuttle.
All right, fine.
I get what you mean, and I mean, in terms of what I liked about it, I mean, it was like, I did feel like, and maybe it was a little too superhero cliche type stuff, but you know, the first trailer, you know, the criticism was kind of like, oh, it just feels like this is the Tony Stark show that Spider-Man shows up in, and this one, like, I just kind of like that we got to see Spider-Man doing more superhero things on his own. I mean, even with still the Tony Stark beats that were in there, but it was just less, you know, like, if I didn't know any better, I would have thought that the first trailer was Iron Man 4, you know.
Iron Man and his little friend.
Yeah. So, I mean, that looked good. I still think, I do feel like Michael Keaton is looking like probably one of the better Marvel villains, although I guess time will tell on that. But, you know, that does remain the one consistent weakness, and regardless of whether it's film or Netflix or TV, whatever, Marvel just can't seem to get villains right. Outside of maybe Loki.
You didn't like the Kingpin in Daredevil?
He was okay. And Kilgrave was very good in Jessica Jones. Yeah, I don't know. Any thought on that, Dan?
I think the scene with him in that hangar where he kind of like, you know, he kind of espouses his, you know, like, belief in his own kind of sort of crime family, and says to, like, and he says Peter's name, I think, and says, like, you know how it is. And to me, that, like, is the essence of a good villain in one of these movies, is that there's kind of a personal or philosophical connection between the hero and the villain. And I think the best example of this in at least Spider-Man movies is Dr. Octopus and Peter Parker in Spider-Man 2, where they're both kind of scientists who have their own kind of twisted views on responsibility with their, you know, like, science minds or whatever. And I thought that was, like, great. And here I like this kind of call out to responsibility and family and things like that, and that has me really stoked to see if that is actually a fully fleshed out idea.
I have to say the star of the trailer for me, and maybe I'm biased, was Spider-Man's amazing friend Ned Leeds.
Oh, you mean not Genki?
Totally not Genki Lee at all. Absolutely no. That's a coincidence, and how dare you?
I do love the little elements too, like with him swinging through the neighborhood. Tony says, "Can't you be friendly neighborhood?" You know, and he swings through and lands in the pool. And I'm like, I hope there's a lot of stuff like that of him just kind of being this, you know, kid that is getting into antics in the spider suit, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was a lot more impressive, I thought, than the first time around. But yes, it gave away absolutely everything, Brian.
Not absolutely everything. We don't know. We still don't know that Michelle is Mary Jane.
That is true.
Okay, so there's that.
And I mean, and there was like some additional information just about the movie itself. That was kind of came out concurrently with the trailer, where we did learn that there was not going to be a Daily Bugle again. You know,
which is a shame, I think.
Yeah, I don't quite understand what the resistance is with that. I mean, is it just that there's no topping J.K. Simmons, so they don't want to go down that road again? I mean, that seems kind of odd to me. And, you know, it does seem like with the Vulture character that it does seem like the actual rivalry is more with Tony Stark. You know, Spider-Man's clearly going to get in the way of that.
On that note, it was also announced that there's going to be less than 15 minutes of Iron Man in the movie. So his role will be very limited.
Oh, good. Well, we saw about a third of that already. Then.
Well, it's kind of like how Spider-Man was in Civil War for 15 minutes, right?
Right.
Brian,
let's talk about your Bendis interview a little bit more, because there were a bunch of kind of like, I mean, I would say Scoopy Scoops, I guess, as we've been calling them. And in my mind, I think that thing is kind of a tacit, like sly announcement of Spider-Man 2. Am I reading too far into this?
No, he pretty much, he was dancing around it, but I think that's the secret project that he's working on with Sarah Pichelli.
Well, I don't think you've really gotten into it on your show, but what are your thoughts about Spider-Man 2 happening now? I mean, like, it might not be the multiversal story that the previous one was, because the Ultimate Universe is sadly no longer. But, like, does that story still have the kind of draw to it that it once did, with people kind of hopping in and out of universes constantly, and us becoming very, like, familiar with a wide range of Spider-Man characters? Like, when Spider-Man came out, they were kind of like the special two. Now we've got like a dozen titles. Does Spider-Man still hold that kind of special place that it once did?
I think it does, only because the heart of that book for me was Peter Parker and Miles Morales, their relationship, the bond that they formed. And that's something they teased in issue 1 of the current run of Spider-Man. Like, they supposedly had this mentoring relationship, and then there was an issue of ASM 2 where they had a sort of play date scheduled, but they never really got into it. And I think that's, even though the Ultimate Universe is gone, I think that relationship is one thing is going to be at the heart of it. And also the cliffhanger was, who is the other Miles Morales? And Bendis was saying during our interview, we had asked him, what happened during those 8 months, and who else knows Miles is from another universe? And he was saying, well, all that will be answered. So I think that cliffhanger of who the other Miles Morales is, I think that's maybe not in the way he might have been thinking when there was a separate continuity, but I think I think those are the two elements that we've certainly been waiting for over on our show. So,
do you think that's why he's been so hesitant about releasing the details of Miles's background in the 616 universe? Is because he's been waiting to do it in a book that would clearly get a lot more eyes on it?
That makes total sense to me. I mean, I think yeah, basically. I think that's gonna work better. The timing is right, I guess, and especially if you have, as we've been saying, this 18-month stretch where you're not going to get sidetracked with other things. This is it.
Let's bring this podcast on home. Well, let's take this home. Yes, you can find all of our new Amazing Spider Talk and old Superior Spider Talk podcasts over at the old SuperiorSpiderTalk.com, where we do all kinds of awesome writing and all that stuff. Or you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and YouTube by searching for Amazing Spider Talk. And if you do, please be sure to leave us a review.
Yeah, and additionally, be sure to check out our brother podcast. That's you, Brian. The Ultimate Spin, if you want to keep up with the adventures of Miles Morales and Spider-Gwen Stacy. Brian, why don't you tell us, besides Ultimate Spin, where we can find some of your great stuff out on the internet?
Sure. Well, I will say for Ultimate Spin, we're over on Superior Spider Talk as well. And we're at ultimatespinpodcast.com, and links to all our social media pages there as well. And also iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play for us too. Just search for Ultimate Spin. And for me, my Twitter and Instagram and other podcasts that I've been on, you can find that all at project37.net.
Awesome. Dan, what about you?
Yeah, of course, again, superiorspidertalk.com. You can find me on Twitter at supspidertalk. And if you want to see the comic that I'm making, you can go on Facebook and check out the page for Comic Entropy is the name of the page. So go check that out if you want to see the book I'm making. Mark, you're all over the interwebs. What have you been up to?
Yeah, well, I'm on superiorspidertalk.com with there and Brock again. Still the greatest pun ever.
I love that.
See, I'm so glad that people like that, because usually I overthink the puns. Chasing Amazing blog, you can find some little retrospective type pieces. And, of course, you can pre-order my book, 100 Things Spider-Man Fans Should Know and Do Before They Die, from Triumph Publishing, all major book retailers, and in Previews Magazine for April. So find that book and order it before it comes out in June. And, of course, guys, you can always find me on Twitter at ChasingASMblog.
Well, Mark, we typically end this show with a story from your Uncle Ben, but, my curiosity has been piqued in a different direction this time, because we got a really interesting voicemail that I want to play for you and hear you respond to, because I think it calls for a response. So let's give that voicemail a listen.
Hello, my name is Smith, Agent Smith, and I'm with SHIELD. That's the Sympathetic Home Insurance and Expected Life Dividend Company. And I'm calling for a Mr. Mark Ginocchio. We take care of the life insurance policy of Mr. Benjamin Parker Ginocchio. And to be quite honest, we've received quite a shocking number of claims on this one policy. Now, we understand that sometimes people are resurrected by magic ninjas or brought back in a perfect clone body, but the number of claims that have been made on this specific policy are quite frankly a little ridiculous. So we would like to speak with Mr. Ginocchio as soon as possible. Thank you very much. We will find you.
Mark, it seems you're being called out on making a bunch of false claims about Uncle Ben's death. How do you plan on responding to this?
Dan, this is outrageous. This has been a very tragic time and time again in my life. My Uncle Ben has been a father figure to me and will continue to be a father figure to me until he's no longer a father figure to me, and then he'll be a father figure again to me. Do you understand that, Dan? Yes.
I do, but now I'm beginning to suspect Uncle Ben's death might have been organized by you as an insurance money scam.
Absolutely not. What am I using this money for? Have you seen where I live? Come on, Dan. This is ridiculous. What do you think? I'm buying more wheat cake batter with it? This is ridiculous.
I feel like you might be saving up to buy those annuals.
You know what? Venom Sting, dead. With great power must also come Amazing Spider Talk.